I am, again, Holly Murphy. I work at a public high school for OPS, and I am co-hosting tonight with the lovely Cassie Young. Say hello, Cassie.
That's me. Hello.
Yes, and so today we're having this conversation, and we're having it in a public space so that people can join us and observe and participate. And then we're also going to be recording that conversation and putting it out for other people who are perhaps attending the other action today or just have other things that have prevented them from attending live to view later. So this conversation is going to be recorded. We'll let you know that up front. We're planning to keep the conversation to about an hour or so, maybe an hour and a half. And so before we get started with that, we just wanted to kind of go over a little bit of the Zoom functionality. Maybe you've done Zoom meetings before, but perhaps you might not have. In the bottom left corner, you'll see a button that says mute and a button that says stop video. You can click stop video at any time to turn off your video if you're multitasking or perhaps just don't want to be seen. Of course, we'd love to see you and interact with you and get those nonverbal cues, but we totally understand if you want to keep that off. You can also click the mute button and leave yourself muted unless it is your turn to speak. That really just helps with keeping the background noise or the echoing. Sometimes those things can happen when multiple people are on a call. So we would appreciate it if you'd stay muted until it is your turn to speak. At the bottom, you will see and towards the middle a button that says chat. There should be like a red number there if you haven't clicked it open yet to indicate there's unread messages. You can use that chat feature to ask questions at any point in time. And then we will be like watching that chat and answering questions as we can while we're having our conversation. But at very least, we'll make sure we circle back to those questions before our event is over today. And yes, I saw the question or the statement in the chat, someone can join at any time. And that's honestly true for anybody that's here. If you need to step out, that's fine. If you can only stay for 20 minutes, that's fine. We're just so happy that you're here for whatever time that you're able. You can also use a little reactions button at the bottom if you'd like. The only other thing I would like to show you with functionality is you will have the tiles that have the faces of all the people who are in the meeting. You can pick the grid view, which will give you access to more people's faces. Then next to that is a view where there are tiles stacked on top of each other. That's probably the default that you have. If you go over one more to the left, you will actually switch it to only the active speaker. So you'll eliminate all the other faces except for the people who are having the conversation. And if you want to remove yourself from like seeing pictures at all and just focus on the slides, you can click the one on the farthest left, which is hide thumbnail video. And you can also drag and drop those pictures. So if you feel like they're in the way or preventing you from being able to see what's on the screen, you can move them. Okay. So enough of that. Let's continue with the introductions. I am going to pass it to the students next. Students, will you introduce yourselves, tell us where you are from and what motivated you to do this work?
Well, my name is Vanessa Amwa. I graduated from Central this year, and we all just, well, me personally, I thought it was interesting how we all collectively had something to contribute and how we could improve our school system. And I think we just want school to be better for everyone who now goes to OPS.
I'm Lauren Anderson. I also graduated from Omaha Central this year. I would agree with Vanessa. I think all of us have an idea of what our school system should look like and what can be improved now. And given the time in quarantine and everything going on, we recognize that we had a window to put time and effort into this organization. And we didn't mention it yet, but the students are from What Youth Can Do, which is our organization. So yeah.
I'm Jay Saunders. I just graduated from Omaha South. I was introduced to What Youth Can Do by a friend, Aisha, and it really piqued my interest because I'd already started to get a little bit more active within groups that could improve school for students. So that really their mission and their plan really resonated with me. So when I joined, it was a perfect opportunity to leave a mark on the community.
My name's Samrat Hapte, and I also just graduated from Omaha Central High School. And I joined because when everything was going on, I kind of just felt like helpless, like there wasn't very much that I could do to contribute to make the situation better. And when Lauren approached me about joining What Youth Can Do, it just felt like a good way to use my personal experience as an OPS student and be able to do something about what's going on and make a difference.
And also the other OPS student that is going to join us, her name's Queen Alabi. And yep, so we just all came together, and we all have unique experiences as we have unique identities. So we all contribute to that conversation.
I think that's important. We have to honor the different reasons people come to this work and find value in it. And for some people, that's because it relates to their work or their specific identity. For some people, like for me as a white woman, maybe I have to have like an entry point, but at the end of the day, no one should need an entry point into this work. It's important work for everyone. And we all come to it in different ways. So thank you for sharing that. Cassie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Cassie Young, and I'm doing lots of things on my computer, so excuse my face. I'm from Papillion La Vista South High School. I'm a special education teacher there, but really, honestly, this work right now that I'm doing is with Educators for Black Lives. So I want to talk a little bit about what we are and who these children are, young adults. So what youth can do is the group of students that have helped us today. They volunteered their time to come have this conversation. When we asked them what their mission was, this is what they told us, and I think it really encompasses a lot of what they have started to do and what they'll continue to do throughout this journey for them and then the kids that take over after them. Their rally was a beautiful thing. We'll talk about that today. But who are we as educators? Educators for Black Lives, we are looking to work with what youth can do and other student groups, hopefully to transform and take our passion in being anti-racist, and we want to create lasting systems of change in education. So that being said, today for this meeting conversation, we want it to be a really safe space and a brave space. So I modified, took these norms from some places that I found online, as well as the National Association of Black Male Educators, who really just kind of encompass what we want to do here today. We want the students to speak their truth. We want the community members and other teachers who have joined us to listen, to mute and use the chat and have conversations there. We hope that you listen to understand and value all perspectives. And we want you to lean into that discomfort. That's really important for us to do, especially as white people, is to lean into that and take big risks and to start to learn and unlearn and work to recognize our privilege. So if you're feeling uncomfortable, that's okay. And we ask that you just ask why you're feeling that discomfort and what can you do about it, and have some reflections within. We want you to own your intentions and your impacts. That's a no-brainer for these students because they do those things on a daily basis. In the end of the day, expect non-closure because this work is ongoing for the duration of the rest of our lives, and we're never going to take our foot off the gas. It's important to know that you might not walk away feeling like, oh, I have all the answers now, but know that we're going to work together to continue to move forward.
One thing we want to highlight is that we are entering this conversation today with this specific group of students. And we'll be asking these students to talk about their experiences, but we in no way hold them up to be a representation of all students or of all types of learners. And so while we are engaging in this conversation in order to learn more about the student perspective, we are also being cautious in expecting their words to embody like the experience of all types of students. But we still hope to learn and grow as a result of this conversation. So we have collected questions from the Facebook group, from the event page, and from the registration for the people who signed up to attend, and just through email. And so we've taken all those questions and organized them into our organization's 4 goals: advocacy, education, empowerment, and training. We probably admittedly have more questions than we'll be able to talk about, but we'll do our best to address them and address the ones that we feel like are perhaps worthy of discussion together. If for some reason we can't get through all of them, we'll make sure that we get some type of response to those questions and post them in the event page or in the group and so on, so that all questions that were sent to us do have the opportunity to be asked and answered. But I do want to reiterate that this is an informal conversation. It needs to be informal. I want everyone who is participating to feel comfortable. So if you do need to leave early, or you need to take a break, or you need to sip your soda, you do what you gotta do, and enjoy it while we are here together. And then remember to use that chat feature. So when we talk about the questions, we're going to start with our first goal, which is excuse me, advocacy. So question number 1: have you ever had a teacher advocate for you? What did they do, and how did that make you feel?
Oh, you got it. You got it.
No, you go, Jay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. One very specific uh example that's like sticks out of my mind that I'll always remember. It was like later in my elementary school years, and I was in either the 5th grade, and our 5th and 6th graders were able to participate in a leadership group at our school called Principals Advisory. But you had to be nominated by teachers, and I had tried to get in the group and stuff, but no teachers had nominated me, and there were only like 6 members, and all 6 members were white. And my 5th grade teacher, Mr. Rouse, who was he was like very outspoken about rights for Black students, and he didn't really hesitate or hold his tongue when it came to that type of stuff. He took me out of lunch and went to address the principal directly, and he advocated for me and basically told the principal why he think I should be in the group, and then I ended up being in principal's advisory for the rest of the year. So that was a really good experience, and that was the first time as a student when I was like, oh, like my teachers do care about me and stuff. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Jay. Do you feel like that pattern, let's say, of the conversation mostly including students or stakeholders that are white and omitting other voices is a pattern that's kind of constant, or that is, let's say, repeated in other places?
I'm sorry, maybe repeat your question. I didn't hear you. My bad.
No, it's okay. I ask like very like teachery questions. It's fine.
Mhm.
My question was, so you said that that group was composed mostly of white students and didn't have any other voices. And so my question to you is, do you feel like that's something that you witnessed often? Was that a pattern? Is that typically how those conversations went?
Yeah, definitely, especially throughout elementary school. We didn't address too many things, more like ideas like how we could get students more involved and stuff, which is good. But then middle school, you see the students with a voice, or students who are leading maybe like assemblies or little things like that. Most of the time they were white. Or even in high school, even though I went to South High, we had a smaller white population. We were predominantly, our students were predominantly Hispanic. Even though we didn't have as many white kids like representing our population, they always had representation within our leader groups and stuff like that. So I think like throughout my school, like my school career, there has been representation. It's definitely a pattern.
So kind of going off that same line of thinking, you all have gone from being advocated for to very strong advocates, obviously. So my question is like, what did teachers do, or what did you encounter, or in what way were you mentored in order to become that advocate? So essentially, I want to know how you became a strong advocate, so we as teachers can take that skill and spread it around and generalize it to our students that we're currently teaching. Does that make sense?
I mean, me personally, I feel like I don't think it was a direct conversation. It was more me observing other youth in society, especially when those school shootings were going on. I know is it Emma? Is that her name? One of the girls up there, how she was speaking was really powerful. And I guess seeing someone your age do something that big, you kind of feel like, oh, I can do this too. And just like different school things, like if we had a Socratic seminar, you're basically supposed to defend your point, and like everyone's allowed to say their opinion and defend themselves. And I think that was good practice. and also I was in mock trial. So we're basically trying to defend our position against a bunch of private school kids. So we had to learn to stand our ground. And I think it's just a lot observing because I don't think there's direct conversations about advocacy. I think when in the classroom, it's more like, okay, I teach what's in the curriculum, but I'm not really allowed to give my opinion on this or I'll get in trouble. But I think it also depends on your connection with the teacher or the teacher's connection with the classroom, if they can relate to the class or do you feel like you can connect with them on this personal level. But I think it was definitely mostly observation. So not like blatant, like this is how to advocate for yourself, but just seeing these subtle times where, oh, this is an example of how I speak up for myself and other people. Because if you don't do it, who's going to do it? You can't wait for someone else to speak up for your problem that you're going through.
You kind of answered my next question a little bit. My next question was going to be, how can teachers or administrators advocate for you or be strong allies for you? Like, what can they do for you? And it sounds like what you suggested was that, number one, you need good models. You need people to be good role models and to use their voice themselves and to demonstrate how to use their voice so that you can use that as a learning experience to develop your own. But what are some other things that you wish teachers or community members would do in order to partner with you as an ally or advocate for you?
I feel like this has just happened recently. Like teachers are actually asking students what they want, what do they think? Because I think a lot of people forget, like I feel like in all levels, like if it's like government officials and the citizens or like teachers in a classroom and the students, like who's actually being impacted is not the person making the rules. And that's a big problem because I feel like that's why people do feel powerless in those situations and think they don't make a difference, is because you kind of made to feel like belittled, like I know more than you, so I know what's best for you. But I think it should be an open conversation, because how are you going to know what I want and what I need if you don't talk to me? So I feel like if that would happen early on, like these discussions that we're having right now should have happened while we were in high school, because these problems are not new at all. They're just now being seen by people that might not be negatively affected by them. But yeah, just open dialogue is with students and teachers is very important. And I feel like it's better than like, oh, like I understand you're supposed to teach me things, but we can teach each other things in different aspects.
You kind of made me think of a follow-up question. You said we should have been having these conversations while we were in high school. I think that there's lots of different viewpoints about like what's the right age to start having these conversations. If you had to say, like, from your personal experience, at what age in your life do you think that you would have been prepared to at least enter into these conversations, even if they weren't like robust because of your age, let's say? Do you think that it's a conversation that should only happen at high school or that it could happen earlier?
I think honestly, for me, being a Black person in this country, like this is something that I've always had to think about, like from the day I moved here, like the day I began living here, like it's always been something I thought about, and race and like how I'm treated because of my race. And I think it's important for all students, like even the white students, to have these conversations just as early, because a lot of times it's like kids saying hurtful things to each other, doing hurtful things to each other because they just don't know, and they should know. And like these conversations need to start super early, because that's when I have to start thinking about them.
Lack of education breeds ignorance. I know for many of my white counterparts, and having these conversations, it's often my white peers that are uneducated about these issues because they've never had to think about them before, because they're not the ones adversely affected by these issues. So that's a big part of why one of our demands is why we want to emphasize Black history in the curriculum and make it a more equitable environment overall. Because if you're only hearing the history from the white side or the privileged side, you never hear from the oppressed. And therefore history allows itself to repeat over and over again in this negative cycle. So it's very important that these conversations happen as early as possible for all people, not just those who have to struggle with the threat of such a broken system.
Yeah, it's like interesting because I feel like subtly how society is today is teaching us how to be racist, even within the Black community. Like, oh, basically we're only slaves and then we're activists fighting for the same things when we were slaves. They don't teach us about how we had kingdoms and all that stuff. So obviously if you keep telling someone that they're nothing, they're gonna subconsciously believe like, oh, then I am nothing, even if they're supposed to. How are they gonna advocate for yourself if you're being taught that you shouldn't have to? Basically, is what I'm saying.
Speaking of your demands, that's kind of the next question. We want to talk about your demands that you made at your rally and any updates that you've heard on that since then, because we know you were looking for some data. We know that you were really pushing for some curriculum change. So give us an update, even if it's nothing. That's okay, because that's a problem for us.
So we were able to, so we've been using Culture House, which is a community space in North Omaha, as a meeting place for a lot of things. And we've been in contact with a few school board members. I think it was last week that we were able to meet with Amanda Ryan, Kamara Snow, so just Snipe, and then Mark Snow as well. And who do you want to send it to? That was my watch. Sorry, everyone. And we were able to kind of communicate with them and see which board members would be an ally for some of our demands compared to who might put up a little bit of a struggle. So we were able to do that. We spoke with State Senator Tony Vargas about affirmative action and repealing the ban on that. And we unfortunately realized that that's likely not going to be on the ballot until 2022, but it just puts out even more long-term goals for us to chase. We've been looking at recruiting members that are underclassmen. Yeah. I can't speak right now. So right now, everything is really a work in progress. We have another team meeting tomorrow to go over our next steps, which would most likely be some more rallies. But I think everything right now is just garnering more attention and support for our movement, and beginning that dialogue with school board members.
Yeah, and also making our demands very clear, because I feel like when people just hear Black Lives Matter, they stop listening. And when they actually look at our demands, I feel like it's clear that we all want the same things. And I think we need to make it very clear and explain why we want this and why it would be beneficial.
Well, you have the ear of a OPS Board of Education candidate, Ms. Keegan-Korf. And she would like to know, I'm going to point her out specifically because I think it's important that you know where your allies are. She would like to know how the school board could best represent your interests, and if they were to advocate for a student school board representative to represent your high school, would you be interested in participating? Identifying some students in every high school that could be like an advisory board to the Board of Education.
I think that would be a good idea, because I feel like, just like I was saying, we should be part of the conversation because it's our schools that we're going to. And instead of not, like, I feel like it shouldn't be like, oh, I've never talked to the superintendent before, or I've never talked to this board member. Like, they should be in our schools seeing what policies are going on and what is going on in the schools in order to make sure it's a positive learning environment. Because I feel like if you have a student voice, especially coming from the school that's going to be impacted, it's a lot better insight in what's going on and what needs to be done to improve kids' experience in OPS.
Unmuting. Okay. So I also want to, not to summarize and move on, but your demands can be found on your social media. We'll go over that a little bit at the end, but like you said, we're pushing the movement, we're doing the work, so we need everybody on board. So to be supportive, let's get on the social media and be ready to listen. If these students are asking for things on their Instagram or their Facebook, let's show up. Let's give them what they need. So y'all, we're here for you. So I want to switch gears just a skosh, because we talked about this before we started recording, but you all had some wonderful points that I would love to hear again. What are your opinions on our COVID-19 return to school plans? And I know most of you represented OPS, but we represent other districts around here as well. So thoughts?
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay. I personally believe that, like, education and school involvement is important, but it's not as important as lives. And you'll hear a lot of people who are supposed to believe or who are supposed to be our political leaders. They'll talk about statistics a lot and talk about the low risk of people dying, but the fact that there is a risk prove that it's dangerous enough. I believe it should keep like students at home and teachers safe, and try to find another way to educate those students at home so that you don't affect their families or people with underlying conditions and stuff like that. Because learning and stuff, it's vital, but there's other ways you can do it without risking young kids or well anyone's life, not just the kids, the teachers as well, and the staff.
Yesterday we were talking to Hallie. She made a really good point about how a lot of the blame has been put on the school board and like the district, but in reality, it's like what else can they do? I believe it was Betsy DeVos was saying that she wanted to cut federal funding for school districts that wouldn't reopen, and they're kind of just stuck between a rock and a hard place. Like, what are they supposed to do? And I think we need to hold the elected officials like Gene Stothert and Pete Ricketts. They need to be held accountable for this, because if people die, and people will die if we open up schools, the students will die, families will die, teachers might die, and it's awful to even think about. It's awful to think about, but like the school district, I don't believe is responsible for that. I think it's Pete Ricketts and just like the government officials who have done nothing to prepare us for this, who have completely left students and staff and teachers like out to dry, and there's no real good solution. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just glad I'm not the one that has to make those decisions right now.
Going off of what Simrat said, I wanted to say it in an even more informal way. I think for me, I believe most of the other members share this opinion. I think we've all talked this over. I think what's the most ludicrous aspect of this is, like Simrat said, people will die. It's not a question of if, it's like when. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's most difficult for me to understand, is how people are still, again, like, it's a very difficult situation. There's really no right answer, but it's hard for me to understand why there would even be alternatives in a situation where you are guessing when people are going to die, not if they're going to, because there really is no safe way to reopen schools. I know that I'm certainly grateful that I don't have to come back to school during this. In fact, I think Simrat and I both have online, and Vanessa, both our universities all went online, so we're all going to be home. And just the amount of students, the amount of teachers, the families that will be put at risk, it's just horrifying. So yeah.
And honestly, I think the pandemic's really showed the inequalities in our education system, and it's been a few months, so it's like we're trying to make up for not acting quicker. Like, we never shut down, and the only time we had any restrictions on going out was when we had curfew for the protests. And I feel like it's very telling of what are the priorities of the officials, because I feel like people are saying, oh, it's not bad in Nebraska, not that many people are dying. No one should have to die. That's someone's cousin, brother, grandparent, and it just seems like we should have already proactively prepared for this, because we knew school was going to happen, and a lot of people have different situations. Some are single parents, some have grandparents, and this is a lot of stress to put on teachers and students in this situation. And I think, I don't know, it's not as satisfying. I know this is a really hard situation, but I feel like they could have been more proactive about this.
And I think the most frustrating part for me has been like hearing the president and other elected officials talking about like, oh, we can't pay people to like stay at home. We can't keep giving stimulus checks. We can't do this. We can't do that. Like, we can't, it's too much money. But we know they have the money because they spend it in other ways. And it's just very frustrating to understand that their priorities aren't the people that live here. And it's how they're going to make more money. It's ridiculous. I don't know. It's very frustrating.
Oh, sorry. Hallie made a really good point. She said that she should not have to go to any student's funeral or any student's parent's funeral. And I think that was a really strong statement, because like, these are people's lives. I think people who are not that affected by it don't see the severity of the situation for people. Like, this is their reality.
So you're referring to what Hallie was talking about. Can you talk about what you attended today and what that looked like and what that felt like in Memorial Park this afternoon?
Oh, okay. Well, Vanessa and I were both there. And I think for us, it was really powerful to see the amount of teachers that were advocating not only for themselves, but for their students' families, and using the red ribbon to kind of show the distance required. I mean, it's like simple math. Like if you don't have enough space in the classroom cannot function. You cannot safely have students within the classroom. And the amount of square footage necessary for each student to have 6 feet of safety, of 6 feet of a boundary, is it's ridiculous. It's so difficult to accommodate. So I think being able to physically show that and also convey that to all of the cars passing by on Dodge, it was really difficult to see. I think prior to this, we were talking about some of the signs we saw. I think the one that moved me the most was, it said, "I would die for my students, please don't make me." So it's really upsetting to know that the onus has been placed on teachers to both keep their students safe and educate them, when in reality they can't really happen at the same time.
Teachers already get it hard. They already have a hard time in the classroom. Like, our teachers go through a lot, and now they have to handle a pandemic and teach kids.
Well, thank you for sharing about that experience. If anyone is interested in viewing footage from the political action today, I know that it's available on Facebook Live. I'll try to find that video and link it in our event. So if you would like to go look and see perhaps what some of the teachers had to say, and I do believe that press kit was there too, so you should be able to see some of that on the news. We'll see. One thing that I am proud of in terms of where I work is that it's been doing some good work in English, working on how to identify curriculum that is more authentic and representative of the students and community that the school district serves. And that same statement can't be applied to other districts. And that's not to mean that we have it right and that we've got it perfect, but that I know, at least as a teacher, that those conversations are ongoing, and I appreciate them. And so working on curriculum in the last couple of weeks with the curriculum writing team, it made me want to ask, what are some of the ways that you felt your curriculum in school, like the things that you learned, represented you and prepared you to be an adult, and what did not? And if you want to say that it didn't, it's okay. I'm not going to get offended. I want you to be honest and tell me about your personal experience.
Our curriculum at Omaha Public Schools curriculum, just in general, we depend on the courses you took. I mean, some courses taught things that would help as adults, such as financial literacy, or history classes or geography classes. But just in history classes alone, growing up, only thing I ever learned about people that look like myself was slavery and the civil rights movement, really. And I mean, but outside of that, I didn't learn anything else about Black people or African Americans or just Black people across the world, just in general. A lot of things I did learn about that I had to learn on my own or outside of school. And then obviously you have your other courses that you'll use in college, like math, science, English and stuff. And even in English, our curriculums are very inclusive, or it had a lot of literature or work from white authors and stuff. And only time we did learn about that is if the teacher actually themselves just took the initiative to teach us that. So as just a person in general, the curriculum isn't bad. It teaches you some things, but as a Black male, I mean, I felt really, just learning about some of the things I didn't know, I felt let down by our curriculum, because that's just my history and stuff, my ancestors' history, and that stuff is important to know as you grow up and stuff, and as you enter the real world. It gives you a sense of pride. It gives you a sense of yeah, just pride is the biggest word I could think of right now. But yeah, our curriculum has to improve to help students of color for sure. For sure. And students in general, it's important to know the history of your counterparts, even if you aren't a student of color, because then it's easier to respect your student or respect your counterparts and your students. And like Lauren had said earlier, ignorance, the ignorance comes from just not learning about it. So yeah, our curriculum just has to improve.
And I think Vanessa and Jay were kind of making similar points. Like, Black people are not just their struggles. We're not just slaves. We're not just like civil rights activists. We're doctors. We're engineers. We are creatives. We're everything. We're in every facet of this country. We're in every facet of this entire world. And it's really disappointing to go to school and learn that all you are is someone who has dealt with a lot of hardships. Like, that's your history, and those are what your ancestors are, and it's really disheartening, and it doesn't really give Black students the space to see themselves as anything more than just someone who is like constantly working their way out of struggle.
Okay, you got me. You're right. You know, it is the you're right when you said that a teacher chooses to bring it in. The reality is that you're going to have teachers that make this work important and central to their like pedagogical space, how they believe the classroom should operate, and you'll have teachers that won't. And we might be told sometimes that it's better to omit those types of things because they're like too controversial or too emotional. But Jay, excuse me, what I thought you were saying, basically what you're describing is that it's just another way of like erasing, and erasure is so I can't even like say the words, like it's so makes me emotional to think about, even though I'm not a person who has experienced that. It still makes me wonder sometimes like what ways in which teachers don't knowingly recognize that they like participate in that. I mean, I know that I have a teacher that works in another school district. It's not mine, here in the city. And at her grade level, the only African American text that's offered is The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which is like written by a white person and like problematic in 1,000 different ways. And so we have work to go. We have room to grow when it comes to curriculum, for sure.
Yeah, and also I just noticed this really irritated me that we only talk about Black authors during Black History Month, and we were talking to other teachers like, oh, why aren't there books with Black authors in the regular curriculum? Because the teachers pick it. So I guess a teacher looks at a list of books and like, oh, I read these are good books that I know. I don't think they would even notice that they don't represent their students because they're like, this is normal, this is what everybody reads, but they forget that everybody's not like them. And I don't know, I guess they made a thing like, oh, this is what you need to learn in English about English, and it's in this book, it's in Shakespeare, it's in all those other books, but why can't we go into Black literature as well? Like, there's a lot of valuable things that we can learn that people are ignoring, and it's just, I don't know, it just shows how people don't really see the issue because they don't see a problem with it because it's so normalized. Yeah.
Okay. That was awesome.
Let's shift to empowerment. I feel like we kind of
exactly what I was going to do.
Yes.
Read my mind. So now that we've talked about your educational experience a little bit and kind of the lacking in the curriculum and a couple of your demands, one is to improve the curriculum, two is getting diversity in IB honors AP classes. So I want to talk about you all empowering yourselves and each other. Might be a long time ago, it might be pretty recent, but I'm curious about the time in your life when you were able to identify racism, that it exists, that it's happening around you. And then on the same kind of note, here's when I figured out it existed, here's when I figured out I had a voice in this and I could make the change.
Honestly, I don't think I can identify a time in my life that like I didn't know that racism existed.
I don't know. For me personally, I've always gone to predominantly white schools, like since elementary school. And I guess it was till middle school where I realized that what that was, like how I was being treated, was racism. And even now, I have trouble identifying that because it's just everyone made it seem so normal. Because I remember, like even recently, like when I was in elementary school, I was in gifted and talented classes. I always, like, my parents wanted me to be in those special programs, but I would always get sent to like the pack room. I don't know if you guys heard about those, but like there was an instance where I wasn't doing anything. I got sent to the pack room when everyone else was being rowdy doing the same thing, and I was like, this seems unfair. I don't know why this is happening, but like being like a kid in elementary school, you don't really think about that. Like I think some parents don't want you to feel like you're different, but sometimes it's a matter of like life or death. So you have to always like evaluate, oh, how am I going to be perceived in this environment? Are people going to treat me differently? Do I have to work harder than everybody to be seen? And just like, it's even like, obviously in school, kids are mean. Like even, I know middle school, it's a problem. Like a lot of kids would make fun of dark skinned students. Like every time someone turned the lights off, they're like, oh, where did this person go? And it's like, haha, that's so funny. Like everyone would laugh, but then you're like, wait, that actually like hurts my feelings, you know? So it's like, I guess when you start realizing like, oh, this makes me feel bad, this is not normal, when everybody makes it seem like it is, that's when you realize that, oh, this is the problem and I'm allowed to speak about it because other people feel the same way.
Yeah, and Vanessa made a great point about the pack room. That happened a lot in elementary school for me, and just for a few, because I went to a predominantly white school too in elementary school. That happened a lot with me and the few black kids that did go there. We you'll see, even if you were doing something with your white friends that maybe you shouldn't have been doing, or maybe that's not necessarily good for a learning environment. There's like the decision for you to get punishment is a lot quicker than your white counterparts. And as a kid, I always just thought it was weird. I didn't think much of it, but I'd be like, well, we were doing it together. That didn't make it any more right that I was maybe doing something like talking a lot during class or something little like that, like as a kid. But I'm like, well, we were both talking, so why aren't we both getting in trouble? And like, Jay, just stop talking, go to the back room and stuff like that, like often, a lot. So yeah, stuff like that. And even you see it in high school at South a lot. We had a security guard who, if he's seen you in the hall, and I don't want to like maybe judge his character because I didn't know him very well, but it was very obvious that he was a lot more skeptical of the black students that went there, and he would always question, like, you could literally be walking with students or friends who weren't black, and he'll always question, like, what are you doing? Like, you're supposed to be in class, all this other stuff. Or, hey, you need to go to where you need to go. Come with me to your administrator, stuff like that. Silly stuff when you weren't doing necessarily anything wrong. So that stuff is very real. And I disagree with what Vanessa said.
I wanted to say, so Queen's here. Do you want to test your mic really fast, Queen?
You guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I think about, when I was introduced to racism, it was really young, and it wasn't, it's a harsh introduction to those things. You can't just really be like, this exists, it sucks. My parents are both immigrants, so they sat me down. Like, probably one of my earliest memories is them sitting me down and being like, we're different, and a lot of things are going to be harder for us because, number one, English isn't our first language, and we're Black. I think in elementary school, a lot of the racist experiences that I had were microaggressions, but I think for some reason middle school was racism was a lot more prevalent. Not even just like students, like what Vanessa was saying, like people turning off the lights and being like, oh, where did Queen go? But even teachers, like I remember in 8th grade when we were learning about slavery, my teacher being like, oh, well, Queen, you said that your parents are from West Africa, so your family was probably brought over to America on a boat, which is like, it's just crazy to think that a teacher could say that to their student in front of the class.
Thank you for sharing those. I know that that's not easy. I recognize that. I know it's not easy for me to hear, but that's not the point at all. And unlike our brave safe space norms say, when something makes you uncomfortable, the question should be why. And so I kind of want to ask just a continuation of that. In those moments, it seems like there were adults present. And so my question is, what could those adults have done? What would you wish that those teachers, those administrators, security guard, whatever school staff member was near you witnessing, even some of the things that came from your peers, what do you wish they would have done?
I mean, I feel like it shouldn't be that hard for adults in that situation to just be able to speak up. And like, even if it was if my teacher was the only adult that was present in that room, like I went to the principal's office and I went to my counselors and I told them about the situation, and all of them were like, oh, you're being dramatic, like it's not that big of a deal, she wasn't trying to be racist, but you just called me a slave. Especially like being a first generation African American, I have the privilege of knowing where I come from. Like that's something that a lot of Black people can't look at a map and look at Africa and be like, oh, I come from this country and I come from this country. To know that I'm Togolese and Nigerian, that's a privilege. So for that to my existence to just be like tossed away, and especially for this to happen at a school that was named after a Black man, for no one to care, it's like, why are we doing any of this?
Does anyone else want to talk on that one?
Yeah, I just feel like I should not be hard for teachers like, oh, that's racist, you're in trouble, we're going to teach you why you shouldn't say this, because it's most likely like what they're saying is either from their friends or from at home, so they're learning this behavior. And I just feel like the teachers also did not realize, they make it seem like it's not a big deal, but they don't realize how comments like those can escalate to things that are happening in our nation today. And I think that's why I think like how racism is so normalized in our society that even adults, like head figures that are supposed to protect students and make them feel good about themselves and good about learning and education, they don't even I don't know if it's them not realizing or them not thinking it's important, because you should be able to like, oh, that is racist. Like I feel like people don't realize that being racist does not only mean like saying, oh, I hate Black people. Like it's a lot of other things that people do every day without a blink of an eye.
Absolutely. Like, say it again. So essentially what I'm hearing is it's not okay to claim ignorance anymore. We're past the point in time when I didn't realize. It was in our norms, right? You have to understand your intent and what impact that has on the people around you. And if you mess up, own it, because that's okay too, right? I'm going to shift gears again into like the training portion of our sections, but it kind of goes along with what we were just talking about. Something that Holly and I have, and our whole group have spent a lot of time talking about is things like school rules and dress codes and things. So coming from your all life experience, what rules and expectations have you encountered that you experienced and were like, yep, nope, that's racist. Nope, that is not fair to me. That's not fair to a group of people. So then we can kind of look at those and start to move towards better rules and expectations and codes of conduct.
My bad. I'll answer first. Growing up, especially with younger Black women or young Black girls in school and schooling environments and stuff. They're hypersexualized, and it's very sad. Like you'll see a lot. I've seen like I can't even comprehend. Like now that just like when I think about it, now that I'm older and I can understand it, I can't even like I'm at a loss for words. Like for like stuff they would get in trouble for, or when they would get dress coded and stuff, and they're wearing the same things as the other girls in the school, the other girls. It was just ridiculous, and you'll see so much. You'll see so much. You're like, hey, you can't wear that. That's inappropriate. Or you'll see teachers tell the young Black girls, hey, honey, you need to cover up, or stuff like that when they're just showing their legs or something. And it's kind of sickening to think about it now, because like that's a child. Like, why are you viewing them in that way in the first place? But it also speaks to how young Black girls are viewed amongst people, like just in public settings and professional settings. Like they're expected to be 5 times as professional as other girls and other women are, and that's just ridiculous to me. And I've seen it so much in schools and meetings and events, a lot of things. Like it's just sad to think about, because I have my mom, obviously. I have my grandma. I have sisters, aunties, girl cousins, and it happens a lot more than people would think. And as a kid, you just don't think anything of it, but they're sexualized for no reason. And the dress code definitely, especially in OPS, because I've been in OPS for as long as I've been in school, it's really unfair to black girls and girls of color. So it's disheartening to see.
You actually unlocked a memory of mine from middle school, and you make a very good point, because that's completely 100% true. But I remember I was in the lunch line just waiting for lunch, and I had this teacher like approach me slowly, and she proceeded to button up my shirt, even though I wasn't like, I don't know, either way how I was dressing, it shouldn't even matter, but she buttoned up my shirt. She's like, oh yeah, I had to get that for you. You should try to cover up more. And then she just walked away, and I'm like, what just happened? Did this teacher just put her hands on my clothes and tried to tell me to cover up? And just like things like that, I feel like how that's unlocked memory, the fact that like these things happen and people think it's normal. And just in the, like, someone made a point, I forgot where I read this somewhere, but like the dress code says girls can't wear this, girls can't wear that. I guess guys can wear tank tops, but whatever. But it never says anything about making students feel comfortable in their clothes, because it shouldn't be, clothes is not what makes people do the things they do. You can look any way and still have things like that happen to you. And I think that should be more enforced, that this, like as a student and around your other classmates, you have to be responsible for your own actions. You cannot blame someone who's like the victim of it, whatever is happening, for what is occurring. And I think that should, I don't think I seen that in the student code of conduct before, and I think it should be in there to address not the dress code, but it should be just a code of respect for all students.
I wanted to speak to the administration of discipline. I can't speak from perspective besides like being dress coded for wearing shirts before, but like data has shown from OPS that students of color are disproportionately disciplined in comparison to their white peers. And that ties into our demands. But even just that blanket statement that students of color, specifically Black and Indigenous students, are disciplined at a far higher rate than their white passing peers is incredibly upsetting. And it's an unfortunate reality that has to be directly dealt with. So I think more than certain rules or expectations, it's about how these rules and expectations are carried out. And I think what Jay said was a great point. It's that Black students are expected to act at a level of professionalism far higher than their white students, because they're already placed in expectation far lower. If that makes sense.
And I don't remember where I heard this, but I think it was probably from Lauren from the Education Rights Council, but she was talking about how like a lot of the stuff like the behavioral rules that we have in the code of conduct are subjective. So a teacher can choose to penalize one student for doing the same thing as another student differently, because I don't know how to describe it well, but like because it's subjective, they can see like one student talking out of turn as like a worse offense than another student talking out of turn. And I think a way to solve that problem is make very clear and concise language in the code of conduct that describes like exactly like what punishments are carried out for what behaviors, and instead of like completely focusing on punishment, maybe work on like teaching moments instead of jumping straight to you get in trouble for this and you get this on your record.
So, Vanessa, I think you said something about how dress code should reflect that we feel comfortable in our clothing. And I think that we say buzzwords like that a lot. Like, what is a safe space? Like, what makes students feel safe in our classroom? And teachers will be quick to pick up that flag. You know, my classroom's a safe space. And so I wanted to ask you, you know, what does a safe space mean for you in a classroom? What makes any type of learning environment safe?
I feel like a safe space is where everyone has the same on the same page of being comfortable and being themselves unapologetically, not being afraid to be perceived in a certain way, which is like a stereotype or just a misconception, where you can have open conversation about how you feel. And I think that causes this sense of comfortableness. I don't know if that's a word, but I think like just like how people call counselor's office a safe space, it's because you're able to express yourself however you want to. And I feel like when people tend to express themselves to each other, there creates this understanding, and I think that leads to empathy and being compassionate towards each other. So I think just open-mindedness in a classroom or environment serves for a safe space.
It's all about relationships. Anything else to add about that? Okay. Okay. So on that same note, teachers, I know that teachers that I'm talking to, we're dealing with a lot of fear and anxiety right now because we've been able to get away with, I'll say, I don't know, I'm speaking for my own self right now. We've been able to not have to talk about race and intersectionality and issues for a long time because we were told, you know, you don't talk about politics in the classroom, you don't talk about these things. And so I've heard teachers say, I don't see color, I'm colorblind. When they feel that fear, rather than go to, hey, I'm colorblind, I see no color, what do teachers need to say in that moment to help you feel valued? What do they need to respond with, I guess I should say?
I think they should say nothing. I think they should listen to the student and what they're saying, because obviously they can say like, oh, I don't understand what you're going through, but I'm here to listen to you and help you any way that you need me to. Because I feel like you just need to listen and have the student tell you what they need, and then you act accordingly to that conversation. More like just listening, basically.
I was gonna say the same thing as Vanessa. Just listen to understand and not listen to react or listen to speak. Like it's as simple as just being open and learning more about your students and how they feel, as opposed to trying to prove that you aren't a bad person. Just learn and listen. That's really the most simple thing any teacher could do to make a student feel valid. Like really listen though. Don't just listen to push them aside or their feelings aside, or just to give them some satisfaction. Like really listen to understand your students.
So I'll follow up a little bit because I want to know, and I know teachers want to know, what we're going to listen to our students. Redirection in that moment. What do teachers need to do to redirect? Like if there's something that happened in that moment where a student said something insensitive, I know that a lot of times that's when teachers feel fear. I have to make this correction right now, but I have to do it in front of the whole class privately. So like as a student that has been a recipient of that moment, what's the best thing your teacher can do there, I guess?
I think talking to the student like one-on-one and not embarrassing them in front of the whole class is the most helpful, because if you're getting in trouble in front of 25 other kids, you're not what you're going to want to do in that situation is just be quiet and hope it ends soon, and you're not actually learning anything from that moment. You're just like, oh, I hate this, she's embarrassing me or he's embarrassing me, and you're just going to want it to end. But if a teacher takes the time to talk to you and let you know what you said or what you did was wrong and why it was wrong, I feel like you're more likely to listen.
We have one more question that was submitted by an attendee tonight. And so we'll just end with this one last question before we start moving towards our action steps and then opening the floor to questions from the other participants that are here with us live. So this question was submitted: how can I have these difficult conversations with middle school kids? How can I have these conversations when my class is predominantly white?
I think kids in middle school like are already having these conversations, whether or not you hear them. Like these are things that are definitely happening in our conversations, or at least it was when I was in middle school. But even it's hard to tell like allies how to have these conversations because we have completely different standpoints, but you have to address it. And they have to be uncomfortable conversations, especially if you're having them in a class with mainly white kids. Yeah, they're not gonna understand it, but they still need to learn about it.
I think what Queen said is a really good point. These conversations are always going to be uncomfortable. They're always going to be hard. And if a teacher shies away from having them just because they're afraid of the reaction from the class, that just further contributes to the problem. And I also wanted to mention something that was stated earlier. Concerning this, I think one thing that we have emphasized over and over again is that this Black Lives Matter is not
Political.
It's not political. It's about human rights. It's
human
about
rights
treating
issue.
others equally.
Yep.
So if a teacher's excuse for not having these conversations with their students is because they don't want to get into politics, that is a horrible excuse.
Yeah, it's not politics. These are people's lives.
Yes. And with a predominantly white class, and also with what Queen said, I think especially older teachers might underestimate the power and the influence that we have as like a younger generation with social media. I guarantee you, this is literally like, it might just be like the way that I've like curated like my feed, but like almost everything I look at all day is like mainly Black Lives Matter, mainly politics, like mainly about this. People are going to hear about this. Your students are going to hear about this regardless of what you do.
Exactly.
This is not something that you can keep them from being exposed from. It's not something you should keep them from being exposed from. But it's dangerous if you have students that are looking at negative, that have a negative feed of information where this might be painted as something horrible. So it's important that you take up that position in order to educate your students correctly. And yeah, it's just important. Just have the conversation.
Someone needs to start the conversation because these kids, I don't know, some of them definitely don't have it brought up at home at all. And that's a problem because ignorance is bliss, but also can be deadly for some people. So it doesn't really matter how scary the conversation is because the effects of not having the conversation is scarier.
Sorry, I was taking a moment to write that down. You really got some, there was a lot to unpack there, actually. I plan to like rewatch it and kind of go through because I think you touched on some very big points, which made it a great question to like wrap up with. So action steps. What do we do after this conversation? We listen to what you have to say. We're put in this uncomfortable place where we have to ask questions and figure out how to listen better. But then what do we do as a result? Cassie, what do you have for us?
So check out the slide. What Youth Can Do has a Facebook and Instagram page, WYCD. You can look them up very easily, and they're linked to our page, and we will shout them out tonight too. So they're an easy follow. Come follow us as well on Facebook and all that. But here in Omaha, put your money where your mouth is. Support Black businesses and nonprofit organizations. We have a list as well on our link in bio that there's 20 different organizations that you can help out that are all Black owned that support our community. And that's where our money needs to go right now. Voting is super important. And Keegan said before she got off that she's really grateful that you all are either voting age or really close to it, because y'all are the difference makers right now. We also have instructions to contact your legislator on our link in bio. If you have a script or something that you've written that you think is amazing, you can always send that stuff to us, and we're happy to share it out to get that message to a broader audience. Like it says on the screen, this is not an exhaustive list. There is so much you can do, and there's so much work you should be doing on a daily basis to make this world what we want it to be. I want to open up for questions if there's anyone in the chat or anyone wants to raise their hand. We can ask the students a couple additional questions maybe, but we also want to be respectful of their time. So. I'm good at wait time. I want to give them time to type if they're typing a question, if that makes sense.
While people are thinking their questions out, I just want to reiterate that it is so empowering for other students, but also for me as a teacher to see what you students are capable of doing. I do think that there's this like ongoing narrative in like older people that teenagers are like powerless, or that they're like like not focused on like things that matter, like caught up in their video games and like binge eating or something. And it is very refreshing to see that narrative. I mean, I know that narrative's wrong, but it's still refreshing to see examples of why that narrative's wrong all the time. And I think this really links back to that question about middle school students, because I think that as adults, we are constantly estimating what students are capable of doing. And if anything, you've just like blown out of the park that like you are capable of anything you decide to do. And you have a voice that is just as powerful as an adult's voice. And the reach that, I mean, you guys have reached thousands of people, I'm sure, with your social media posts and with your rally and with the media really just canvassing and getting that information out there. And so in one way, it shows me like, I can learn from you as much as you can learn from me, or maybe even, honestly, let's be real here, I could probably learn from you more than I can learn from myself. But still, the idea that you are, and also maybe when it comes to having conversations with other students and beginning to enter that space of having the uncomfortable conversation, that we really should believe in the capabilities of our students and know that they are capable of these things as well. So were there any questions in the chat or any other things that we wanted to ask before we closed? Nope. Okay.
Just thank you
Yes.
times a million for your time. You do not have to give us this time. You do not have to say all these words to us. We are not owed your stories. So we will forever be grateful to have heard your stories and your voices tonight. So thank y'all.
Thank you for your time. We really appreciate this conversation.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us time to speak to
More.
us.
Bye, everybody. I'm going to stop the share and stop the recording.
Have a good night. Thanks for attending.
Have a good night,
Have a good night,
everyone.
everybody. Bye.